Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lessons in Leadership series brought to you by Manage the Docs, a community for technical communication leaders. My name is Akash, and today I have the honor and privilege of talking to a special guest, David Nelson Gull, also known as DNG, who is the founder and chief product officer of Viakoo, which delivers performance, security, and compliance management for enterprise IoT applications and devices. A little bit about DNG. DNG is an accomplished entrepreneurial engineer who has led teams building patented high-tech solutions for over 20 years. He has worked in both startups and large multinationals. He brings a unique blend of business and technical acumen and leadership to the table. I worked with DNG a few years ago, and I still remember his energy, drive, and engaging leadership style. So today I would like to ask him a few questions that will give you guys an understanding and insights into some of the business trends, visibility into a decision maker's head, and valuable leadership tips. And that's what Lessons in Leadership series is about. Um, my Thanks a lot, DNG. First, I would like to acknowledge that thank you for accepting the invitation and coming to this session and sharing your tips with us. My first question to you is about, with so much moving to the cloud, licenses are becoming a thing of the past, and it's easier to switch to another vendor. You can just change from Netflix to HBO to Disney Plus very easily. So do you think that technical content can play a role, especially technical documentation, can play a role in engaging users and keeping them loyal to a brand?
Okay, yeah. So, there's many different dimensions here around documentation and how it helps a SaaS-oriented business, which we have. The key thing for customer loyalty is the first issue they're expecting to get to loyalty, which is that renewal, that constant renewal. That is nirvana for SaaS business. Yep. You want to get them not only to be behaviorally loyal, but attitudinally loyal. And so that means that they become engaged with the product dependent upon whatever you're doing.
Yep.
And you don't give them reasons to leave, right? You know, for some kinds of services, there's enough inelasticity that they may not like you very well, but it's hard for them to leave, right? Yeah. And we're in the business of business-to-business SaaS, so consumer-oriented products may even have lower thresholds, but for business to business, it comes down to how are you making people's lives more effective, more efficient, better, more cost effective. That's one whole vector, and that's in the feature functionality of your product. And documentation is a component of that because it's related to, here you have some great capability. How intuitive is it for people to take advantage of that capability? And where it's not completely intuitive, you have to complement it with information, okay? Yeah. Now, the thing that gets you to attitudinal loyalty, which when we were working together, this is where I developed these strategies. I don't know if you remember that or not, but the attitudinal loyalty comes from, there's dimensions of this feature functionality and how do you make your lives, well, someone's life more efficient or better. But then there's relationships. What is my relationship with the organization? Do I know who to call to get help? Do I feel respected when I'm dealing with them? Mm-hmm. But then there's this wow innovation dimension. And you can, when your product or service or capability is doing something that just surprisingly delights the user, okay? Yep. So, and that comes from customer intimacy. And what is it doing? Because people get involved with a service, not just because they're buying a capability today, they're really buying a roadmap. Who are you? What are you doing? And what are you going to be continuing to do? Especially with SaaS, it's constantly improving.
Yeah.
Potentially. And so if the users experience wow innovation, it gives them a sense that you know them better than they realize themselves. You've got a feature that they didn't even know they needed, and suddenly whammo. Or there's information at just the right moment and point that makes them feel like, okay, now I understand this. And it may not even be obvious that it's documentation. As we were talking earlier,
Yeah.
Information is more than just here's a website over here, a knowledge base over here, which you point people to, and historically people don't go there. You know, when they're struggling with a problem, they'll ask somebody else in their office first, then they'll call up, they'll send email to your support line, and only if all else fails will they go to this portal with information.
Yeah.
Yet that's problematic from a scaling standpoint. A lot of times users do like to be self-service. It makes them feel a sense of pride if they can figure it out. So we were talking about how does the information get technologically infused with the product, and there's really cool things that are going on. You know, the first thing is not just a help menu somewhere, but we often will have a help bubble on our screen all the time, where if you click on it, you can start typing a question, and it's dynamically searching the knowledge base while you're typing and offering up useful articles. Like if you say, how do I do this? If there's an article on that problem, then that link is right there. So it's sort of just in time access to the knowledge base. But if you can't answer the question, there's always this opportunity to send your question to our support people. So it's not like it's just documentation, which if it's unsatisfactory, it's integrated in how we're servicing our customers. And we talked about technology that becomes more aware of the customer and how they're using the product and whether they're struggling or not with it. Like the first time they log in, can they get an information experience that guides them through how to use the product just for that first time user? Yeah. But then subsequently, the user is not leveraging the product in ways where in our data it says they're not building up that engagement, or they're not doing the things that would make them a loyal customer. When they next log in, can we prompt them, give them a few tips and other things that kind of, it gets them involved with the richer dimensions of the product so that you can build that loyalty. And then the final thing I was saying is like, even in your documentation, how do you do certain things? Can it link you back into the product? The more the information and the product are perceived as one thing, the more successful you're being, because I think users there's a certain amount of intuitiveness you can provide in your product. And if it's something like Instagram, you never look for the documentation in your Instagram app. But if it's a somewhat complex B2B product, doing several complex things for users, they have to conceptualize it to some degree. And you have to fill in the gaps of what's the obvious intuitive thing and how do they really leverage the product in the best way. So we're constantly looking for ways to technologically integrate information so that people can be successful.
That's a very interesting point, and especially when you brought up things related to B2B, that's where things are more complex. And so related questions for B2B is, what kind of content helps us scale the business? Should the content be for the partner ecosystem, or should the content be focused on enabling self-learning? You already touched upon that there's a bubble available, people can explore that and they will get the relevant content. So where should the TechPubs department leads focus their energy on? Should it be on that aspect of end user content, or should it also be on the partner ecosystem because they help you scale?
Yeah, it depends on when you think of the partner, the channel. Is it around the activity of selling the product to their customers? And so in that way, that content is driven predominantly not on how do I leverage the product and how do I become successful with it, but what are the key features, examples? How do you give people justification or say the right thing that gets them motivated or interested in buying the product? And when you want to scale through channel, that means all this information is about self-service, I think. What you have is all of these individuals that are part of this channel organization. How successful can they be without a lot of hand-holding from you?
Yeah.
Right? What is the marketing collateral, slide deck, secret, information like, these question trees where ask this question. If they say this kind of answer, that means they're this kind of customer. So give them this kind of pitch. Or when they say they're having these kinds of problems, well, then now drive to this because your product does that something for them to fill that kind of problem. And that's sort of the thing that a sales channel partner is needing. They know how to demo or something like that, but in the end of the day, they're trying to sell. Now, there may be individuals where in that channel, which are trying to fulfill then, after a sale, they now are responsible for fulfilling.
Yeah.
Well, how do I install and do all of that stuff?
Yeah.
And so there you're trying to say, okay, how does my customer success organization scale from is it just the onboarding part, or is there a continual servicing of the customer through your product? And then what is that documentation like? And for us, those people are the same as active end users, because our product is the kind of thing that allows users to manage their own infrastructure. But that same person or that same kind of person could be a channel partner selling our service to hundreds of customers, and what they're selling is their ability to take care of their infrastructure. Yeah. Whereas like a large-scale Fortune 500 company, they have sort of similar people, but just their employees in their organization using our product to service a lot of infrastructure. So so my distinction is between sales and the actual technical folks that are using the product. And I'm not sure there's a whole lot of difference on the technical side. Okay. I guess that's my best answer.
No, and that really helps because it gives a perspective on how you are enabling different types of partners. There are resellers, there is implementation partner, there's a support partner, and we need to start thinking about it's not very different. So that's what you're trying to say. You are trying to make everybody self-sufficient by providing content. You just need to figure out how different it is, but essentially you are enabling more people.
Yeah, but if I think about it, I'm also saying, how do we design a solution?
Yeah.
And so who am I talking to? For users of our product and the technical documentation we're creating to go with it, we're sort of doing usability analysis and studying who are those people and trying to figure out how do we create a solution where those people by and large can be successful without burdening our customer success organization with, where we have to hire more and more humans to make sure our customers are successful. All right.
Yeah.
Whereas the sales side of the equation, you're studying the sales process and what are triggering buyers and what sort of flips what looks like an opportunity into a transaction. Right? And it's a different scenario, right? They're not interested in they're not compelled by, look at how easy it is to install, except for maybe worrying about cost. They're convinced by these grand notions of cost effectiveness and various sales pitches around wonderful feature sets, which is traditionally what marketing people and salespeople are focused on, right? When I say X, or when I throw up this pretty slide, I tend to get the transaction. When when the buyer is hemming and hawing in this way, and I ask them, if I can ask them this question, it tells me what kind of response to give.
Mm.
So it's a usability problem, but just on the sales side, right? So
yeah, you're nicely leading me into my next logical question, which is, what do decision makers really care for? Are there specific deliverables from the content side that they are looking for that helps them make a decision?
well, to some extent, in terms of product decision making, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to
It could
um,
be it could be about a product upgrade as well. They have already purchased, but now they want to upgrade. They are motivated by something and they would want to upgrade, but they do not have enough knowledge probably. That could be one aspect. One aspect could be about buying. So there are two things. One is an existing customer, the other one is somebody who is buying for the first time. But which deliverables really help them make that decision?
so hopefully, if you're doing your job right, you're building up this attitudinal loyalty I mentioned before. So what does that do? There's a virtuous cycle that starts to happen when you get to attitudinal loyalty. If you're delivering like capabilities that just work, and at various points there's for us at Viakoo, we call them Viakoo moments. And that's when a customer will respond to us like they can't believe we can do something, right? Like, or you just wowed them in some way. Like you guys did something for me that I didn't even know I needed, or I didn't even believe was possible. That triggers in their minds the sort of pride that they made a good decision when they went with you. It also, and this somewhat dependency on you. So you need to keep doing that. When you do that, right, then they become this asset you can leverage, just like your intellectual property. We constantly are having conversations with our users because we're connected to them almost directly. They're using our product. We can tell when they're using our products or not. We can see what they're doing with our products, okay? And so we try and have regular conversations with them talking about their needs and experiences, because that gives us hints where there's deficiencies. Like, it's really hard to do this problem. Or, you guys are really good in a lot of these places, but I'm having trouble with this new feature you just gave me. I don't understand it, or I don't know what it's all about. Invariably, they're telling you also about their future needs. Here's what you're solving for them today, and here's my new set of problems, right? That the handful of users that give us that insight when we actually deliver that capability is another wow innovation for everyone who didn't have that conversation with us. Like, how did you even know that we were doing that? Okay. So when I think about how technical documentation's role in this is, because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I think of it as integral to the capability we're rolling out. Like, if we're rolling out a new feature, what's there that allows people to be in a self-sufficient way successful with it?
Yeah.
Right? It's sometimes, there is for us, actually, one of the things I try and do is I actually make the release notes content rich with lots of graphics and other things, screenshots and other things. So that when they see the release notes, it's not this long, boring list of, here's all the bugs we fixed in this release, right? It usually begins with, here's this exciting new thing, and here's a screenshot of that new thing. And so what we'll see is a surge of activity as people get the release notes. So that the release notes actually are kind of the introduction that people often receive that inspires them to try stuff out. Because otherwise it's like, they don't even know the thing got upgraded. It's all happening behind their back. So we just send it out to them. So it just occurred to me how that kind of technical information is actually the first instinct that something changed, and go check it out. Inspires them to go check it out. Then they jump into the product, and there is some complexity in what we're doing. So there's paradigms that are useful. Once you understand the paradigms, it's easier to understand the whole. So trying to craft information makes it easier for people to understand those paradigms, helps them be more successful with the product. And that's really hard. Yep. Because as we were mentioning before, you have to do some, just like you have to do usability testing on the product, you have to do usability testing on your docs. And it's easier to prioritize the usability testing on the product. And you sometimes will skip the usability testing on the docs. And so you're not always aware where your docs are failing it because of that. But,
yeah. It's interesting you mentioned about the release notes, because even Neil, the CEO of iManage, he also takes release notes very seriously. For us, we would just create a bunch of, here's a new feature, here's the new bugs we fixed, here's the bugs that we are still, there are known issues. And he said, that's not what I want. That's because I want to forward this to some CIOs. I want them to really use this to be motivated to upgrade the product. And if you give me this, I will not be able to send it to them. Give me something that has screenshots. Give me something that gives them an intro into what's coming next. It should really be exciting. Write it in a way that's persuasive. So you mentioned pretty much exactly the same thing. Said, thanks for confirming that.
Yeah. And what happens is the same release notes, because it's one product and you can buy upgrades into different features, that same release note package goes to everybody. So that people who have the more limited functionality are seeing what they're missing, right?
Yeah.
So fundamentally, it's somewhat a marketing thing, but it's marketing for a product they, in many cases, have already bought. They're just, it just gets richer all the time for them.
True. No, that's very interesting to know. We have 8 more minutes from the specific time that we had set up. My last question to you is, based on your experience, you've seen so many teams in different companies. What are the examples that you've seen that very well-run tech pubs department, or any tips that you would want to give to a team or a team lead? Say, this is how you would be running your department. This is what we care as leaders in the organization.
When you say that, I'm trying to go back to my most successful situations. I think there's a component of the technical team leadership. One of the ways I have such a fond memory of you is how you were engaged in that way, right?
Thanks.
You're passionate about the subject and trying to drive it, as opposed to, I'm just doing a function, right? But also, I think it requires leadership that's thinking of documentation strategically as part of the product, and not just, in some organizations, it's like glorifying every do loop the engineer does, by just crafting volumes of information that will never get read because it's not efficient with users. It's not designed efficiently so that users can consume it. in order to accomplish some goal and get out. They're not there to read War and Peace on your do loops, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's also not such an afterthought of priority that it just doesn't get done, right? And both scenarios are tied to lack of imagination in the product leadership, right? Because there's no way that an inspired person like yourself can be successful in an organization that doesn't believe in what you're doing, right? It just is incredibly frustrating. At the same time, if you have a leader like yourself in an organization, it's not just managing down and leading a team and hiring talented people, but it's also managing up and managing horizontally. Can you inspire your boss with the possibilities, or a documentation that's a strategy on how to improve the business? Like I was saying, it's like giving them the insight that good documentation make you scale. Good documentation or information strategy, I guess, is a better way to, that sounds more noble, because you're not doing books anymore. And with this online technology, it's possible to have information strategically integrated with the actual product so that it makes the whole experience more effective for the end user. And so I would say it comes down to documentation, leadership, guiding their superiors as well as guiding their team, but also that the superiors have to be the kind of people who are open to those kinds of inspiring ways to work and getting, and building a product together. Beyond that, just smart, talented people.
Agree. Thank you so much, DNG. Really appreciate your time and the tips that you gave and the insights that you provided, especially around how it's important to make sure that you enable more people and help them be able to really self-sustain, self-learn things, because that's how you can scale. Those are excellent tips and ideas. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. Good luck with you guys.